All right, so this example I chose to go with some larger coefficients. Um, that way you can feel comfortable with, using larger numbers. Again, we've got that calculator to support us, so we're really not worried about any of the mathematics behind it. We just know that there's a certain form that this quadratic equation must be written in first. So if you notice, I've got 16z squared plus 139 equals 96z. So I do need to set this value to 0 instead of 96z. So to do that, we would subtract that 96z. So 16z squared minus 96z plus 139 is equal to 0. And even though, two previous examples were using an x variable, here we're using a z variable, no big deal. We can still use that quadratic formula because the quadratic formula is based upon the degree of that polynomial equation, not the variable. So the degree is 2. The largest power on our variable there is 2, so we're good to use that quadratic formula. All right. So we're going to come over here and we're going to make it very clear to ourselves what those values that we're going to be using in our quadratic formula are. So A is going to be 16. Remember, A comes from your square term. B is negative 96. So again, we are making sure that we're taking the sign of that term. And then C is that positive 139. So those are going to be the values that we sub into that quadratic formula. Now this time, instead of saying x equals, I can make a little sub and say z equals, because remember, quadratic formula is just telling you the form of your solution. So this time my solutions, to solve this equation, I need to find values for z. So no big deal to say z equals. If in your work you had x equals, that's not going to throw anything off. Now, we start off with the opposite of b. B is already negative, so the opposite is actually going to be a positive 96. So that's going to be that first hurdle to clear with your quadratic formula. I've got my radical symbol, and then I need to take the b square, and this is why those parentheses are so important. So anytime you sub, right, we're going to use those parentheses. Minus 4 times 16 times 139. And I am going to go back in my work and make sure that that radical symbol extends over all of that expression, divided by 2 times 16, which is my A. All right. So here comes the work for us. So filling that quadratic formula in, you should get pretty quick and pretty efficient with that. The real work comes in the simplifying that we have to be so careful with. So 96 plus or minus. Again, I'm going to write that radical symbol, and then I'm going to do 2 times 16, which is 32. If you need your calculator to support you there, no shame in that. All right, so here we go. So negative 96 squared. Notice I have to have those parentheses there. Otherwise, my answer is going to be completely wrong because I'm squaring negative 96. So please make sure that you're using your parentheses underneath this radical symbol for sure. That way, when you need it, like right now, you're going to have it. Otherwise, you're going to get that answer wrong without parentheses around that negative 96. Okay, so I'm going to be writing the number 320 underneath that radical symbol. So my math senses are telling me I've got a lot of simplifying to do in this one. So looks kind of scary, looks like something that calculator support is really going to be handy with. So again, the first thing that I look to simplify is this radical. So I'm going to type in square root of 320. And that gives me 8 square roots of 5. So 96 plus or minus 8 square roots of 5. So I'm just slowly, ever so slowly, kind of chopping away at this reduced form. And then math senses are really telling me that, hey, some more simplifying can go on. So again, now the simplifying is dealing with that number term and then the coefficient on my radical. Because I cannot divide with radicals. That's not something that we necessarily looked at in those other videos. I cannot divide with a radical, like I can't touch that radicand unless this 32 was also wearing the same radical symbol. So just like when we were multiplying with those radicals, that we had to be dealing with the same index. So here where that simplification actually it's going to go on is with the 8 coefficient on that radical in the 32. But again, we are going to separate that division out. So I'm going to say 96 divided by 32 plus or minus 8 square roots of 5 divided by 32. Z equals, so I can use that calculator to support. And you notice I'm using that N over D key because I do want this, don't want any decimals going on, right? So I'm going to keep this in the exact form. And then 8 square roots of 5 divided by 32. And that is going to be still plus or minus the square roots of 5 over 4. I'll make that very clear. There's my plus, there's my minus. So we have 2 solutions here. So this is the first time that those solutions kind of have come down to an integer here, plus or minus, and then that irrational component. So still an irrational number because we have that radical symbol. And to make it very clear what our solutions are, I'm going to write them separately down below. So Z equals, so we have 3 plus square roots of 5 over 4, and we have 3 minus the square roots of 5 over 4. Now I cannot put these 2 pieces back together in one fraction because this 3 has not been written over 4. So really be careful with that. This is the preferred simplified form for these solutions. So we have 2 solutions there, and again, what we're saying is if you were to replace your Z value up in this equation with one solution, right, so 3 plus square roots of 5 over 4 into this Z, and you can actually do that with this calculator very easily. It's really nice. When you hit enter, you would get a value of 0. As well, when you replaced Z in that equation with 3 minus square roots of 5 over 4, you would also get a value of 0. So we've solved using that quadratic formula. We have one more example coming, and then we will be complete with 7.4.